Hello, and welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast with your host, peak performance coach, Brian Bosley. Are you stuck on the hamster wheel of life, spinning and spinning, but not really moving forward? Are you ready to jump off and soar? Are you finally ready to sculpt your life? If so, you've landed in the right place. This podcast is created and broadcast just for you. All of you strivers, thrivers, and survivors out there. If you'd like to learn more about Brian and the Bamboo Lab, feel free to reach out to explore your true peak level at www.bamboolab3.com.
Welcome, everyone, to the Bamboo Lab podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Bosley. 31 years ago, I was in Troy, Michigan, in an office for American Express Financial Advisors, and I had zero management experience. And the powers to be had asked me, hey, can you start doing this thing called being a training manager? I'm like, yeah, sure. And there were some newer people coming in. There was one guy that came in that stood above everybody else. And I was so proud to be able to be the person who kind of nudged him at the beginning stages of his career, at least as a financial advisor. And I brought him on the show today. We have a gentleman who is, quite frankly, one of the most experienced professional men I've ever had the opportunity to work with, work alongside, and call my friend. Shannon Klug, welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast, brother.
Thanks, Brian. So happy to be here.
We have a long history, man.
We sure do.
And folks, we were just talking prior to the show about some experiences that we had back in those days, and maybe we'll bring a couple of them on. So, well, Shannon, I know a lot about you over the years, but can you please share with the Bamboo Pack a little bit about yourself, where you're from, a little bit about your family, and really who or what inspired you growing up to become the man you are today?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. So I grew up a blue-collar kid and right outside Detroit, Michigan. So St. Clair Shores is my hometown. Like any small hometown, as you could imagine. Dad worked in the automobile industry and really from a young age understood what, hard work really meant. Ultimately, I would put him up there as one of my best mentors from a just career perspective. And it wasn't like he said, go do this or go do that. It was really just lead by example. And so I chased a baseball dream for a lot of my life. I played college ball. And ultimately, when that ended, I had to figure out what I was going to do. Math always made sense to me. And from that generation, Wall Street was one of those movies everybody watched, everybody looked up to. And I ultimately decided to be an accounting major of all things. Fortunate enough to land a really good accounting job out of university. And ultimately, after about 4 or 5 years, made the leap into financial advising. So now I've been 35 years giving financial coaching, financial literacy, however you want to look at it, but started out as a tax and accounting guy and ultimately was able to parlay that into, being a financial advisor. So here I am 35 years later.
It's hard to imagine. Yeah, I remember I forgot about your baseball background. I had forgotten all about you wanting to be a baseball hero star.
It was my only passion. I mean, growing up, it's funny now, I look back on things, Brian, and I had this complex at one time in my life where baseball was the only thing I knew how to do. And it's because I had committed so much to it. I was fortunate enough to be recruited in high school to play for a private school. That led to the opportunity to go to the University of Kentucky to play baseball. And then, there's a long story of what happened from there. But, early in my life, that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to, again, chase that baseball dream and maybe be in the show someday.
Who's your team right now? Are you a Tigers fan?
It's hard not to be a Tigers fan right now.
It really is.
But, growing up in the 70s, the Big Red Machine from Cincinnati and obviously the Oakland A's always did battle. And I would say to this day, I still deep down inside, those are two teams that really resonate with me. I would also say with Cincinnati, my mom and her family are from Eastern Kentucky. And because they don't really have pro sports teams in that area, a lot of them, the Cincinnati Big Red Machine is who all my aunts and uncles followed. And I would say I'm still a Reds fan.
Okay. So a Pete Rose fan.
Oh, big Pete Rose fan. I mean, obviously, as his life evolved, there was controversy and so forth. But I would say if I modeled my game after anyone, it was Charlie Hustle. I mean, I was the guy practicing head first slides in my basement. My mom still laughs about I had, rug burns on my, inner arms from diving all the time. But yeah, he was if I had a baseball idol, Charlie Hustle would have been him.
I don't know a lot about baseball history. I don't even watch a baseball game all year, but I follow the Tigers. Every couple of days I check their record. I see who they're playing. Sometimes in the middle of the summer, like on a Saturday, if it's raining wherever I'm at, I'll turn the game on and I'll just take a little nap listening to it. It's so peaceful to listen to baseball when I'm trying to just rest. But I don't really watch games.
Yeah, for me, what I miss about it, Brian, is it's such a cerebral game. And a lot of people don't realize that when they're watching it. But, no matter what happens, every pitch, every, hit, there's an assignment that everybody on the field, has to move towards. And not that other sports don't have that as well. But I would say most people that deeply understand the game understand that it's extremely cerebral.
So what you learned in baseball, that passion, that, practicing in the basement, how did that carry over to you, do you think, to your professional world? Because that's exactly who the guy I remember back in Troy, Michigan. I mean, you weren't practicing sliders in the hallway, but you were definitely doing things that other people who didn't want to do, didn't have the balls to do.
Well, thank you. To me, first of all, work ethic. I mean, one of the things about athletes in sports, you had to be there at a certain time for practice. A lot of times after practice, then, especially the college level, you're hitting the weight room or, sometimes it was watching film, depending on what level you were at. But, the closest thing I can relate that to, I've never been in the military. It's probably the one thing in my life I didn't do that I wish I would have. But that structure and that organization, and that fed to who I was as a person, meaning, again, being an accountant by trade, I like order, I like discipline. So I think when I started, my career, it was truly about, having that structure and discipline. And, it served me really well because from a very young age, I don't want to say I outwork people because there's a lot of hard workers out there, but I think what some people complain about hard work was just second nature to me because I had to do it on the ball field.
Yeah, I see that a lot with people who played sports in high school and then even more so in college. You just see that it's something that starts at a young age with us, and it really never goes away. And I'm so glad my kids, both of my biological children anyway, and actually my bonus sons all played sports in high school, and 2 of them have played in college. 3 of them actually out of the 5 have played in college of sports. So I think it's one of the greatest things I've ever done is just play, stay with sports, even though there are times I didn't even want to play anymore. I was just tired. I had the passion for rugby that you had for baseball, but when I was done, I was done. Like I never looked back. Like I know I don't miss it. But I know that it gave me something that I would not have had I not, gone through those difficult times and travel and practice and sweating and hurt and cutting, bleeding and full of mud and the camaraderie and the teamwork and the leadership you are taught, it's almost even if you're not paying attention, you learn teamwork, you learn leadership. It's like almost through osmosis. Because every player on the team has to be a leader to some degree, and you have to learn teamwork if you want to be an effective player. Unless you're maybe UFC, potentially not, or some of the individual sports. But I forgot about that.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I literally forgot about your rugby days, but I remember us sitting around talking about some of those details you just gave. But what's really interesting to hear you say, when I was done, I was done. And it's funny, people that don't have that same opportunity. And I know I'm blessed to have played college ball. They want it to keep going because they never tasted it. They were never able to go do it. For myself personally, I knew internally, probably, I would say 2 years before I was done, I knew it was coming to an end because that passion, that fire, it was just different. And it was just, it was time to move on. So very similar to yourself, when my door shut, I just, back to your original question, I then found something else that I could pour that discipline and passion into, which, turned out to be my career.
Yeah, it just transferred over. It's the same mindset.
Absolutely.
It's the same discipline. It's the same work ethic. It just transferred over. I remember I played 3.5 years. I think it was 7 seasons. There were 2 seasons a year in rugby. And my final season, I graduated in December out of college. And that fall, I didn't play. And I said, I'm done, And I remember I think it was the 5 o'clock bell at the center of CMU's campus would go off. And that would always be the time we would start practice. Or maybe I was always riding to practice. But that was a sign that, okay, it's time for practice. And I remember for probably a month or two, I'd hear that bell go off and I'd go, oh man, I kind of wish I was out there playing or practicing right now. But it was very fleeting and it didn't really last long. It was but I got 18 credit hours. I got to get out of here. I got to get a job.
And then we met.
Yeah. So Shannon, growing up, blue collar family, like myself, and I see that so many in successful people that sometimes it's small towns grow up, sometimes it's blue collar families. Usually you have a good family structure, whether it's parents or grandparents. But growing up for you, who or what inspired you? Other than baseball, was there a person that, or a book you read or something you saw that kind of made that switch that switch kind of turn over in you?
Yeah, well, I'm going to answer that 2 ways. Number one, I'd put my brother at the top of the list, and I'll explain that in a second. I watched him doing things that really raised the bar for me. And then in retrospect, now years later, I think about the influence that my mother and father both had. And at the time, it was more one of those subliminal messages that now I understand it a lot better. But I had a immense pride inside, I wanted to make them proud because of who they were and the sacrifices that they made. And, it's still till this day when I think about, and again, parents do this for their children, but when you're younger, you don't always understand. But you see the sacrifices, they're doing it for you. But at the same time, now I really believe I did stuff because I wanted them to be proud of me. But if I come back to my brother, my brother is I call him a serial entrepreneur. When he was 12 years old, he had a paper route, but that wasn't good enough. Instead of delivering just in our neighborhood, he would literally go and negotiate with other kids in the neighborhood who had other streets. And he would basically do their paper route and take a portion, it would kind of split the money. Well, in high school, he struggled to go to school all the time because he got this money and entrepreneurial bug. So he had all these businesses going and ultimately was very successful at that, let's say 15, 16, 17 years old. And I was fairly lazy. Outside of baseball, I was fairly lazy. I liked to be on the couch and I liked to sleep in. But my brother was up early and worked all night long. And it was funny when I started in this business, Brian, we had leaders at that time that said, hey, you're going to work 8 to 8. And I remember thinking, oh, that's part-time compared to my brother. Because he literally had multiple businesses where some of them, he wouldn't start. He had an awards business, trophies and awards. And sometimes 11, 12, 1 o'clock at night, he would start putting together the awards that he had to deliver 2 or 3 days down the road. And there were many times he asked me to help him. And that's how we actually had some camaraderie. So it was funny when we talk about work ethic and, who impacted you. I mean, I watched this guy living it out. And man, I'm so blessed today because in my business, he's actually my COO and CFO. So now what I used to watch, we get to actually experience every single day of our lives, which is really, really cool.
So a big shout out to your brother, Sean, right?
Yes, Sean.
All right. So tell us a little bit about BLUMARK. So obviously I was part of your journey back in the early days of you becoming an advisor at Ameriprise. Tell us about what you guys are doing at BLUMARK now, which you founded in 2011?
Yep. So we launched our firm in 2011 and started with really 3 individuals, myself, Jill, who was Tullio at the time, which is now Syracuse, and a lifelong 2-decade friend named Henry Guzzo. So there were three of us really with a dream of just being top-notch advisors. And we've grown that business now. We're in our 15th year. We float between 60 to 70 total employees. We have two very distinct businesses. So we have a full tax operation. So this year probably did a little bit over 3,000 tax returns, and that covers clients in 46 states. And the other side of the business, which is our core business, is comprehensive financial advice. So where we're a little bit unique is, of course, we have our CFPs and financial advisors on staff, but we partner them to give the client a different experience with a CPA or enrolled agent. So those two people work together side by side to help clients build their overall financial game plan, and then obviously help them navigate the things that change as life throws them curveballs or gives them opportunities. So we started out with just three of us, 15 years. We, really have exploded the business. And, when we started, everybody teases me because I said, I will never have more than 25 employees. And here we now sit with, 60 to 70, depending on seasonal tax staff.
That's incredible. I mean, I look back on the early days, and you were one of those guys that I think we all could agree on that you were going to do something big. I mean, you definitely had that direction. You needed very little from me. You needed from any of the people in leadership or management. It was just plug and play with you. And here's what you do, and you went and did it. I remember one distinct day, and I don't know if you remember. I tell this story quite a bit. It's such a good lesson on failure. And you were in the front conference room in the office. I remember exactly where you were. I think it was the very first one on the left when you walked down the hallway in Troy. And it was a Friday, I think. I could be wrong. And I was walking down, and you were getting up. You were in there making cold calls by yourself to get your 12 appointments, and you were getting up and putting a hash mark on the whiteboard. And I came in finally like, dude, what are you doing? And you said, I know my stats. For every 4 no's, I get a yes. So every time I get a no, I put it up there and I celebrate it in my head because I know that yes is coming. So when I'm on my first no, I think I got 3 more to go before I get the yes. When I'm on the third one, I'm pretty sure the next call, or the fourth one, the next call is going to be a yes. And you kind of celebrated those little rejections, knowing that they were getting you closer to success. And do you recall that at all?
Well, I remember years ago, and I'm going to say it's been 10 years, you and I were maybe having breakfast together, and you had brought that up. And at that time, no, I hadn't thought about that in years. But I would tell you that concept is probably still a part of my secret sauce today. I don't use a whiteboard, and I don't count no's. But my belief is, and maybe it's the statistician in me being an accountant, is that it truly is a numbers game. And then the more people you talk to, the more likelihood, your success is going to increase. And one of the things that have really driven BLUMARK is our ability to acquire and retain customers. But I also would say I get a lot more no's throughout the course of the year, not because we're not doing something right, but because timing isn't right for the customer. Mm-hmm. Maybe they're working with a CPA that they're happy with, or, maybe they're, a do-it-yourselfer and they want to, kind of use the internet as their guide, and that's fine. And then I'm always celebrating when, you have a year, kind of like we've had this year, where all of a sudden, nerves come in for various reasons, and then your phone rings, and that's that person that had told you no 4 times previously. So no, I don't really count the no's now, but intuitively, I think you have to go through, not failure, but you have to go through those times in order to have those successes. So I don't remember, doing it on a whiteboard, but I remember you bringing it up about 10 years ago. And I would say that's still a big part of how I think, inside.
I think there's a much more macro learning there for a lot of people, that we are, every time we do something, especially something new, we are going to have those micro failures along the way. And every time you fall, every time you fail at something or get a rejection, whatever it might be, it does mean you are closer to getting that yes, and you're closer to getting that victory. So I think we live in a world today where we expect things so quickly. You get better internet because you want your computer to you want to be able to go from one tab to another a microsecond faster than the previous megabytes or gigabytes or whatever you get on your computer. We expect that, where in reality, the true success is not big aha moments. It's those getting dirty every day. It's being consistent with what you do. It's the discipline and the willpower that it takes. And during that time, you are going to get bloodied. You are going to get muddy. You are going to get bruised. You're going to fall down. You're going to get scratched and scraped. And just realize every one of those scratches becomes a badge of honor, because they get you one step closer to that yes that you want to get in life. So that was a big lesson and learning for me that you taught me, and you don't even realize you taught me it. And it's still something I use in my coaching practice with my clients and for myself as well. I'll have to give it a name, the Klug something. I'm going to give it a name. I got to give you credit for that one, man.
That's too funny.
So can you talk to us right now and share with us, you've been doing a lot of great things, obviously. Your business obviously is doing exceedingly well. You're a strong family man. You got your wife, you've got 3 children, you're strong in your community. What do you think right now is a really good learning you've had that you'd like to share with us, that you think would be something that really kind of resonated with you over the last year or two?
I'm learning it as I get up every day, but I would say my most recent one, which is massively impactful, is the ability to let go. I've literally been talking about this with our team, is the thing that keeps you from moving to that next level or having that next success, however you define it, is letting go of what got you here. And the hardest part as human beings is we want to be successful. We want accolades, or we want people to notice what we've been doing. But the only way that you can go to that next level is it starts with letting go of what got you there. And my big challenge is I've kind of been the rainmaker in our firm, and I'm the person that ultimately has a lot to do with the infrastructure of marketing for our business. And what I've been trying to do now is stop trying to acquire clients one at a time, but start beginning to network to hopefully acquire clients at 200, 300, 400 a time, meaning it's what I do today and the relationships I build that might lead to somebody wanting us to buy their practice 5, 7, 10 years from now. Or it might be somebody who is a solo practitioner right now that, they're on that fast track and they're doing really, really well, but they don't even know what's coming ahead of them because they're going to need help. I mean, the calendar is everybody's equalizer. And to me, I want to be in a position when they realize they need something bigger, that I would be the first phone call they make. I can't do that if I keep, go back to the days in Troy, if I keep pounding the phones trying to acquire clients one at a time. I've always said when it comes to transitioning a business, not necessarily financial practice, but any business, manufacturing practice, if you spend your life doing it, when you realize it's time to transition on, you're not just going to sell it to the next person that walks through the door. You want to be able to transition those clients, those relationships, to somebody you have a relationship with. So my biggest learning by far in the last 12 months is, if you want to take your game to the next level, it starts with you letting go of your past and moving on to something new.
I think Shumpter called that creative destruction.
Absolutely. I don't know that, but it's a great phrase for it, for sure.
There's a book out. I'm not a big hero worshiping guy. Like, I'm not one of those guys. In fact, if other than my mother, who's a hero of mine, most of my people I look up to are fictional characters in books, because at least I can paint them the way I want them to be, not who they really are. But there is one guy named Marshall Goldsmith, who I think is the GOAT of our industry. He's got, I think, 3 or 4 international best-selling books out. Thankfully, he's coming on the podcast later in the summer here, but I've always looked up to him as a man of just incredible wisdom and wealth. And he wrote a book, and I have it in my bookshelf right now. It's called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it's exactly what you just said. And it's amazing how difficult that is for me at times. You realize, Shannon, yesterday was the first time I've ever done a virtual coaching session. All my coaching sessions are done over the phone. If I'm in the city of where they are located, I'll do a face-to-face with them. But I do everything over the phone despite everybody saying, hey, we want to do Microsoft Teams or Zoom calls with you or even FaceTime. And I have refused that until yesterday was the first time. And it was one of those things, like you said, I can't go where I want to take this thing this year, next year, if I only do phone calls. And so I figured it out. I got my computer set up that I could actually do a virtual 1-hour coaching session with a client yesterday. So when you were saying that, I thought that's exactly what I had to do. I had to stop doing what got me to where I am, which is almost all coaching sessions over the phone, to migrating to virtual, face-to-face over the computer screen coaching sessions. So that's a tough one for me to do. I like to hold on to the things I've always done.
Well, if I could share a brief story, probably one of my failures as a leader, I had an executive assistant who was going to start a family and obviously has every right to do that. And I was excited for her and we celebrated. But she gave me a proposal of she wanted to work from home and kind of work part-time. She was going to have somebody come in and watch the baby. And I was so set against virtual work at the time that I said, yeah, that's just not going to work. I need you here in the office. What was great is my brother who worked with me said, hey, she's a talent. I'll take her. And I said, no, that's fine. Lo and behold, this was before the pandemic. She ended up having a very high leadership position in our firm before ultimately transitioning on to, in her career. But I almost cost BLUMARK this great talent because I was set in my ways and I needed her to be in the office. What it really was is I didn't know how to do the virtual coaching. It was I had learned how to take notes on a yellow pad and not move to technology. And unfortunately, this person, BLUMARK would not have been who we are today if it wasn't for her influence. But my brother was smart enough to say, hey, I'll take her virtually. The secret to him, he was actually already living in Florida and the business is based in Michigan. So he was working remotely anyway. So he saw this opportunity when I was so closed-minded that not only did I lose a great executive assistant, but I would have cost the company somebody that went on to do great things in our organization.
See, it's hard to teach us old soldiers the new technologies, but I'm glad you got aboard. Do you do a lot of work virtually, like through Teams or Zoom?
Yeah, we're, again, when you service customers across the country, I mean, it's pretty much, you can't have them come into the office. Yeah. So, it's almost 100% virtual at this point.
Well, I'm announcing to about half my client base this and next week that I'm willing to now do virtual calls, so they can see my face. I kind of like the fact that I don't have to worry about putting a certain shirt on or what's in the background. And honestly, I don't think I've talked to you as much in the last couple of years. The last 3 years, Shannon, I traveled. I mean, I had a house in Escanaba, Michigan for 3 years. I literally just moved out of it this past Saturday. I was at my house in 3 years, maybe, I don't even know, maybe twice a month on average I was there. I'd go a month or two and not even see the house. And so it really wasn't as conducive. But now that I'm settled and got the office here set up in the Wisconsin, the Neenah, Wisconsin area, it's a lot easier for me to do it. And I really liked it. I told my clients that, okay, we're doing this from now on because I really enjoyed it. I can see your face. You can see mine. And there's less distraction,
Yeah, I think for me, Brian, and again, this is one of those warnings of letting go, is I impact more lives and more households today than ever before because I stopped just bringing in clients that lived within a 30-mile radius of my office.
Yeah.
And I that used to be a badge of honor that, I'm this community person and I'm going to go really, really deep. But the reality was there were other people, let's say south in Toledo or north in the Upper Peninsula, that also needed my guidance and help, that I literally couldn't help them because I was set in my ways of, no, you've got to come into my office. So I applaud you for thinking you're going to go that route. And I think, the number of lives you'll impact will explode, with that one small change.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I love that piece of advice. So let go of the ability to let go of what got you here. I mean,
absolutely.
That resonated a lot. I like this next question. And so you answer it however you'd like. It's a question that kind of digs into a little bit about you, who you are as a man. What do you think, Shannon, is one of the most difficult things you've ever gone through in your life? And then What did you do to overcome it?
I probably have to go back to 2010. 2010 was a year I lost my father. My dad was a lifelong cardiac patient. He was in his mid-40s and had open heart surgery. Actually, I was in college when that happened. And we spent, the next, let's say, 2 decades just knowing that, he was going to leave us because of a cardiac incident. Ultimately, he was still working in a shop and, slinging sheet metal, as we used to say. And he started developing a sore shoulder. And long story short, found out that he had a mass in his lung, had lung cancer. And his fight against cancer was relatively short. But when he was battling cancer, I made it a point to go with him. He happened to have his cancer treatments on Tuesdays, and I went and sat with him every single day. I did it for a couple of reasons. Number one was I wanted to give my mom relief, so that she could do some grocery shopping and what have you. But what was difficult, Brian, is I never really had the relationship with my father I wanted. As I explained earlier in one of your questions, he set a great example, great work ethic. He was a great teacher, but there was not a lot of feel good in my dad. There was not a lot of fluff. And as a kid, I needed, really what my mom gave me, which was I needed more physical touch. I needed more loving. I needed that hug. And that just was not my father. Well, cancer gave me a gift, during this time where for 9 months as he went through chemo, him and I had to sit and stare at each other and we had to talk. And as I sat there, I knew I was losing my father because of, doctor's appointments and stuff that I would be there. But I really gained my father during one of the toughest times I ever had with him, because up until that time, he would never open up. He didn't share a lot about his younger years with me. But what he did do during those 9 months, Brian, is, man, you want to talk about talking about my mother. He talked about how special she was, and the pedestal that he put her up on till this day is still a thing that I strive for to do for my own family. But he was never one to tell you about it. He just did it. So losing, probably one of the most influential people in my life to the ugly C word was, very difficult, very devastating. And watching him, go from this, blue collar guy that, was always fairly physically fit. I mean, he also liked to eat too, but, at the same time, to watch cancer, dwindle him, was very, very tough. But the gift I received by him having to be hooked up to the IV and 2 men sitting there talking about life. So when you ask about the toughest thing was losing him and watching that happen. But the greatest gift I ever received was the fact that he couldn't ignore me because he was hooked to that IV, and we had dialogue that I had not had and had really, in retrospect, really needed in my life up until that point. So, you talk about turning a negative into a great positive. I would say that's probably one of the biggest things, challenges that I've ever faced.
Wow. In 144 episodes of this show, that's one of the most profound questions I've ever heard to that, or answers I've ever heard to this question. I love the fact that you guys were, it was, necessity is the mother of invention. And you guys were forced to sit there, and other than staring at each other, you had to communicate and converse. And for you to have that opportunity, but also for him, to be able to pass on, his experience, and just really to sit there and talk about your mother, that I'm sure you knew he loved her deeply. And obviously still does from above, but to hear it from your father, ooh, dude, that's goosebump material, man. God bless you, brother.
Well, I appreciate it. And if I could add one thing onto that, I had I'll call it a dark moment. It really wasn't that big of a deal, but again, as my dad was dealing with some of his cardiac stuff a few years earlier, let's say 5 years earlier, he had a doctor's appointment, and him and I were in a car together. And I asked him how his doctor's appointment went, and he said, "I'm fine." And I'm like, "Dad, I know you're fine. What did the doctor say?" And he snapped at me and he said, "I'm fine." And it was his way of saying, "Hey, you're crossing a boundary here that I don't really want to go into." And him and I had this argument driving down 696, in Detroit. In that moment, Brian, I said to myself, I could either spend the rest of my life challenging this man in an area where he doesn't want to be challenged, or I can meet him where he's at.
Yes.
And that day, I decided to start creating experiences with my father to put us together to do things that he would enjoy. My dad was a big race fan. He loved NASCAR, anything to do with speed, my dad loved. Well, I was fortunate enough. I ended up during that 5-year window, I took him to the Indianapolis 500. I took him to the Daytona 500. But again, it's back to letting go. I had to decide that I was going to have a relationship with him on his terms instead of trying to do it my way. So just a little add on to your question. Again, great mentor. Losing him was probably one of the biggest, difficulties in my life, but I learned so much, from those times with him as well.
And obviously you've lost him physically, but those 9 months together, I mean, it's hard to even probably put into a number or quantify the wisdom he shared with you, the life lesson you got from those 9 months with him. I mean, that you pass on to your children, then down the road, grandchildren. I mean, that's beautiful, brother. And then now sharing it with us. And I think about that a lot when you were talking. It's, we become so impatient with the people we are closest to. And, we tend to judge. My family is pretty good at this, actually. And I say this a lot. People tend to judge people because they don't act the way I would act, or they don't act the way I want them to act. But everybody behaves in the interest they think is best for the situation they're in, whether they're talkative or not talkative, whether they seem cranky or happy all the time or whatever it is, and everybody just has a different style of going through this journey of life. And like you said, when we can meet them where they want to be met and just go with them on that journey, there's a lot of beautiful things that come out of that. Otherwise we're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. And it's just frustrating for everybody.
Oh, definitely. And I think as I'm aging, not old, but as I'm aging, I'm realizing that the older you get, the less flexible you want to be. And we start driving those fences or those walls in between the people that we love the most and care about the most. And I think the best relationships I have today are the ones that I share the most with openly.
Yeah.
And, but that's a hard lesson to learn and hard thing to overcome.
It is really, it's hard to do. And I had a gentleman on, Josh Pashier a few weeks ago. He's got an organization called Uncaged Brotherhood, I believe. And his whole thing is getting men, and these are successful men, that just to get them to share their authenticity and share their vulnerability. And one of the things I've learned, me, Shannon, back in the day, we were, all of us were what we'd call hard asses. Whether we were naturally or not, we were kind of taught to be that way in the industry. And I would not share a lot of things. And now today I coach my clients, my leadership clients, my executives, and I coach them on the key to strong leadership is vulnerability. And I don't mean vulnerability coming in and crying over your cat dying. I mean vulnerability where you can be authentically yourself. And, you can admit to mistakes. You can be happy with somebody else's victories. You can celebrate with other people. You can support them. You can challenge them, and just being authentically you and open. I think that's so powerful. Especially when it comes to friends too. I mean,
yeah. And Brian, I don't know why, but I think that authenticity is something that it just always came natural to me. And I'll give kudos to my mom who, I was a mama's boy growing up and she really made me comfortable in my own skin. But what you just said, I mean, that's the biggest thing I'll take away from this, this podcast, which is that vulnerability, I really believe is what holds some people back. And it's not, kind of like you said, it's, sure, you could talk about, losing an animal, I think was your example, but it's, hey, I'm really good at this, but I struggle at this and I need your help. Or being, telling people, hey, you really make me proud when you do this. Or, hey, I've noticed the growth, that you've made. I think that vulnerability is something that, I just naturally did most of my life. But I think also a lot of times leaders don't really realize they're leaders. They're just themselves. But I appreciate you saying that. And it's something that I'm definitely writing down from today. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, brother. What would you say right now at this stage in your career, in your life, would you consider to be a win or a victory for you? What's something that really gets you going?
It's your questions are always thought provoking, so I appreciate them. A win for me, Brian, is you probably get from our conversations today. Like my entire life, I've always been a quote guy. Everywhere around me, I have these quotes that either people have given me or examples they've seen me do in my life. And on one of my social media pages, this is my own quote. I created this because I was doing a lot of estate planning at the time, and I was listening to families that were talking about leaving a legacy and the things that they wanted to do for their families when they were gone. And I put this quote on my social media page years ago, and it's still there, which is, "Do not spend your entire life hoping to leave a legacy, simply live one." And to me, what I watched was this vulnerability that you just brought up, where people struggled to tell their children or to tell, brothers, sisters, siblings, whatever the case was, how they really felt. And I really think it's a tragedy when people can't overcome that to a point where all the good things are going to be said at their funeral about how they lived and what they did. So I kind of, again, at that time, changed my mindset to, a win for me is, can I get up every day and live my legacy, whatever that is, because I think it's different with everybody. You and I don't talk every day, but I would say you're still as close of a friend as ever. Amen. Because of the impact that you had on my life 30 years ago. So when I got the invitation to this podcast, number one, I'm excited just because we could spend some time together. But if in some way I can leave a little bit of my legacy here in whatever show this is for you, then that's a win for me. So, again, I don't know if it completely answers your question, but that's what came to mind, when you asked for what is a win in life.
What I got at is, don't just leave a legacy, live your legacy. That's kind of, absolutely. That is, and I wrote that down because whenever I hear something profound like that from a guest on the show or a friend or, a client or anybody, instantly my mind goes to, how can I incorporate that? Because it's so interesting with this show, Shannon, and people have asked me, what's the biggest surprise or benefit that you're getting from doing this show? And it is the learnings I get. I'm probably every show I get something that I go, oh my God, am I effing up on that one? I'm not doing that. This was definitely one of those things. I wonder how well I'm living the legacy, because obviously I've got grandchildren now. I've got my children. I've got my bonus children, a total of 3 grandchildren, and 2 more coming this year. And I think about that a lot. Like, how will I be remembered? What can I do to make sure that, no, it's not, don't just remember me. I mean, live it now so they can look to me as that person of character and of value and of not importance to them anyway, where they can role model after me, not when I'm gone, but when I'm here. And that's a tough rock to carry, because it's a lot of expectations and a lot of you put a lot of weight on yourself when you do that. But I think it's a really positive weight.
Well, I appreciate it. I want to clarify, one thing you said. I mean, we all are living a legacy every day. I mean, our legacy will be whatever it is, but is it intentional? I mean, yes. Do you get up every day and say, I need to call that old friend that I haven't talked to? Or, for me, sometimes it's slowing down. I'm so blessed to have my mom who lives 10 doors down from me. And sometimes it's slowing down from just the day to day to walk down and take her for a walk, or to just sit and listen to, what her day was all about. That's the intentionality, so that, again, what she's going to celebrate is my son came down and spent 30 minutes with me. So we're all leaving a legacy every single day by the things we choose to do. But is it intentional, and is it how you want to be remembered? I think, to me, that's the key.
So intentionality is I agree with that. As you were talking, there's a note that somebody left me. Well, I can say who it was. It was Jackie. I have this picture in front of my desk. It's one of those 3D cutouts of Great Lakes where it shows the depths of the lakes and everything, And I have a note she left me a couple of weeks ago. It says, "You inspire me. Your passion for people does not go unnoticed. I love you." And I think when I got that note one day, she left for work and it was on the kitchen table or the dining or in the kitchen when I went out to get a cup of coffee from my office here, and it made me think. Really, that's what people see in me, is my passion for people. And I think so often when you don't live your legacy intentionally, you don't really know what impact you're leaving on people. And it was kind of I didn't think of it in this context at the time of living my legacy intentionally, but it made me realize, if that's the vibe I'm giving off, why do I not know that? And that's the lack of intentionality in me living my legacy. I'm just living it without intentionality. And with what you said today, then looking at this note, now I realize the legacy that I want to intentionally continue to live and live more and more and get better at it and have a bigger impact. So I appreciate you saying that. No, there's two great things I've got out of this podcast or that circle.
Well, I'm glad I could leave this place a little better than I found it, Brian, because I think it's awesome to begin with. I'll share with you something you just said, and I'll encourage your listeners, but encourage you and I as well. We grew up in a time that, especially if you're in a sales career, you were encouraged to send that personal note. You send that thank you card. And I married into a family that they still carry on that tradition. The number of thank yous that they send out are so powerful. And every time I get one from my nieces, my nephews, it truly impacts me deeply. And I used to keep a file, which I don't have any longer, and there's reasons for it. But of all the thank you notes that I had received from people in my life, and sometimes it was because I loaned them $25 when they really needed it. Sometimes it was because I spent time with them, and that's what they really needed. But if I can encourage both of us, but also your listeners today, is think about the impact that note that somebody gave you really has had on you. And I think sometimes we do that with things like Facebook, where we can talk about people openly. But man, sitting down and writing that handwritten note, because it takes time, and time is that most valuable commodity that we all, are struggling to find more of. So do it. Don't wait. Write that note. Let people know how you feel about them, because not only are you going to feel better, but it's going to change the trajectory of their day. For sure.
Right. It's 15 minutes out of our day, but it can make an impact for days for one person.
Definitely.
For Mother's Day this year, and my mom's going to she'll be the first one to hear this podcast, because she always is. I didn't send her a card this year, and I certainly didn't. I called her, obviously. I wrote her a letter, and I sent it the day before Mother's Day, which was kind of stupid, but I wrote her a 1-page long letter on how I feel about her. And I was so excited for her to get that letter, Shannon. And like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Mom, did you get a letter? No. And then it was like a week and a half later that letter came, and she called me and she texted me, and she was so happy with that letter. Because I sat down and took the time to explain my feelings and how much I loved her and respected her and what she means to our family and to me and our, my children and grandchildren. And it was just, it's one of the, like you said, that handwritten note or that handwritten letter has so much more impact than a text or an email or a Facebook. And those are nice too. Those are quantity, but the quality comes from sitting down and putting pen to paper.
Absolutely. And again, I don't mean to pirate your or take over your podcast, but mom, since you're going to be the first one listening, I'm talking to your legacy right now. You have made a massive impact on this world because of that boy that sent you that handwritten note. You did a lot of things right, because this guy has impacted my life tremendously. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Son of a bitch, you got me crying on my own show.
It wouldn't be a Klug interview if one of us didn't cry. I can tell you that.
Oh, shit. That means a lot to me. And I know that's going to mean a lot to my mom. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Ooh. Okay, I like this question. I've got a time machine in Neenah, Wisconsin. I'm going to drive over to your neck of the woods, because I know you're not in Florida. I'm not driving all the way to Florida, but you're in Michigan right now. We're going to jump in that time machine. We're going to go back to a time of your life, Shannon. You pick the time and date and the age you are. You're going to sit down and you're going to talk to yourself. You're going to give words of wisdom, recipes for success, advice, whatever it is. What would you tell your younger self?
I'm going to say this, and some people at my office, if they listen to this, are going to laugh because I tell them all the time. So I'm going to go back to my high school baseball days. And I just made up in my head that as a freshman, I should be playing varsity. And the reality that I learned over time is that I had a lot to learn. But in my own head, I thought I knew everything at that time. But some of what I needed to learn were things like being in the gym. Like I had never lifted weights, and it's very difficult as a freshman to compete with people at a junior or senior level who had been working on their physical body for 2 or 3 years. So, I think for me, it's the word patience, and you're where you're supposed to be right now, because sometimes being on the freshman team or the JV team gives you the reps that you need to perfect your craft. But again, as human beings, we always want to go to that next level. We always want to let go, as I talked about earlier. But sometimes you're exactly where you're supposed to be at that moment in your life. And I think the hardest part, Brian, is understanding those two opposites, is how and when do you let go to move on to that next level? And when do you be patient and say, no, this is where I'm supposed to be right now, working on the things I'm supposed to be working on. And I have always been striving for that next thing. Mm-hmm. And if I could go back and grab myself as a freshman in high school, maybe I would have made it to the major leagues, or at least played minor league baseball, if I would have just been more patient and really perfected my craft by understanding that coaches had more wisdom than me, and they had me in the right spot for my skill set and the things I needed to go develop. So I think that patience word is a huge, huge one in my life.
Well, you and I both struggle with that one. I think, as far as, we're always striving to get better at something or take something to the next level. And I think you're definitely 100% right. It's practicing that patience, but then, you just keep doing that grind, work on the basics, the fundamentals. But then when there is a crack in the door, you go through it. Then you go back to the basics of that level, and you grind and you work on the basics and the fundamentals, and then you wait for the next door to crack, and then you go to that. And I think people just want to jump through all that fundamentals and basics and jump to the 14th level right away. And yeah. I think a lot of it too is, starting in the industry you and I started in, when you get a degree, you get certified, you have you pass all your licensing exams, and then you come into your first. For me, it was my first professional job, and they say, "Here's a phone book, and a script. Just start calling people." It's like, wait a minute, that's not what I thought. I was a financial professional. I thought you were just going to give me some clients with a bunch of money, and I was going to work by magic. And no, here's what you're going to do. You're going to set 12 appointments every week. And that's what you're going to do. You're going to become a glorified phone solicitor for a while. And I think that taught, like, myself and you, those fundamentals of the professional world anyway. You got to go through the grind. You got to do these basic things. I wasn't ready to talk to a client with a lot of money for the first 6 months probably of my career.
Yeah, I think, again, Brian, it's that patience of, sometimes that grind. People are asking you questions on the other end that you have to go solidify in your own mind to become that expert. Mm-hmm. And again, understanding you are where you're supposed to be at that moment is really important, because I've probably learned more from my clients than I have. I've got 36 letters behind my name in the industry, so I've read a lot of textbooks. But I think I've probably learned more because clients ask me this real life question about, hey, I have a special needs son, and I don't really know how to make sure that I take care of him financially after I'm gone. Not that that's not in a textbook, but when you have to come back to the customer and you have to answer that question with clarity, that's how you grow in any business. And, so sometimes you got to go through those steps, whether that's, being a phone solicitor, as I think you called it, or, again, eventually working your way up to do an advanced, tax and estate plan.
And no matter where you are in your career, whatever advanced level, you are still an apprentice in some degree at that level. And I think it's important to always kind of reinvent yourself, almost like you said earlier. But as we get, 30 some years in the industry, both of us, this is my 29th year of coaching. You've been in the industry for 30 some years as a financial professional. We are looked at as the masters, who know a lot of things. That for me, that can get to my head. I have to constantly push myself back down and say, okay, be an apprentice. Assume that you don't know anything and do the basics. I'm not going to phone solicit anymore. I'm not cold calling people, but even going back sometimes, Shannon, I'll read original books like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Leadership Secrets of Attila the Hun. Some of those original books that changed my life 30 years ago, I'll go back and reread those to remind myself that I have yet to master a lot, very little. And I'm still an apprentice in so many things that I do in my career. And I made 2025, I decided last year that this is the year. I assume I don't know anything. I assume I'm starting my coaching practice all over again. So my mindset has been, what would you do differently now with 29 years of experience? What would you do differently, Brian, if you didn't know anything, but you had this experience and wisdom behind you? And one of those things happened to be virtual coaching, trying to explain that, going on to YouTube a little more, reading a little bit more about books that I never would have read before. Because I didn't like the author necessarily. It's kind of doing things that I wish I would have done 29 years ago in starting this. And it's a really refreshing idea. It's a really refreshing feeling for me anyway, to put myself in that apprentice role again. And I love it. I love it.
I think the more you learn, the more you become comfortable that you're never going to know it all. And no matter how successful you become, the knowledge you retain is a thimble's worth of all the knowledge in the world. So, we might be great as advisors or podcasters, but I don't know anything about engineering. I can't build my own house. So again, I think a lot of it's ego driven, as the more you can understand that, your specialty knowledge sometimes is developed over 30, 40, 50 years, and you still have to be an apprentice on whether it's being a cook or whatever it may be. So great lesson for all of us.
Is it okay if I share the story that we talked about before we aired here about the gentleman who got mad at us?
Yeah, absolutely. I made you cry, so now you've got the upper hand. So you get to do whatever you want. It's your podcast.
It's my damn show, man. So, folks, this was when Shannon was in his first year as a financial advisor at American Express Financial, now Ameriprise. Me as a training manager, I was supposed to sit in a lot of the advisors' meetings and with prospects, right? And we had a rule that was it closed 3 times for the check. Was that what it was?
Sure. I don't remember.
You had to ask
for that.
Yeah, you had to ask for the check 3 times. If a client said, "I want to think about it," there was 3. So we were with this husband and wife, and Shannon, I could get some of the details wrong, but my memory, this is what I remember anyway. So correct me if I'm wrong. There was a couple in there. I remember the conference room we were sitting in, and it was like a round table, and you and I with this couple, and you were doing a great job with them. And at the end, the wife it was clear they needed your help. And the wife was like, "Yep, I want to do this." And in the process of this meeting, the husband left a couple of times and went to the bathroom. Anyway, after 3 times we were asking for the check, she was yes, he was still no, or I want to think about it, and she's like, I want to do this, blah blah blah. So we ended up what we called closing for the check 12 times. We asked in a different way. We practiced how we're going to overcome this objection. And I believe the number was 12 times, to the point where at the end, the guy got up. He didn't throw a chair, but he pushed his chair toward us, and he stormed out. And I remember this, Shannon, this part I remember. He went up to shake his hand, and he kind of almost wanted to give me a hug, but I didn't, but he smelled like alcohol. And I think what he was doing was going to the bathroom. Anyway, drinking. Long story short, we closed this guy hard, and it wasn't really Shannon's not that guy to close hard, and I'm really not that guy to close hard, but we thought, well, the wife wants it. Let's see if we can convince him. And anyway, he called and put a complaint on me as the training manager. And the next day I got called into my boss's office and got read the riot act a little bit. And I'm like, oh, okay, you're probably right. Then they end up calling the head honcho, putting him on speakerphone, and told him the story. And when the main boss got done listening, he kind of talked to me for a minute. He goes, and this is not his direct quote, but he said something to the effect of, Brian, if you ever do that again, you're going to be promoted. So it was one of those deals where we probably didn't do the right thing, but we were both, I was the same age as you. I don't think I'm much older than you. I'm 58. What are you, Shannon?
I'm 57.
Okay. So it was these 2 young guys trying to get this lady the financial services she wanted. Her husband was kind of rejecting it. And, the husband was not happy, but I learned a very, very valuable lesson that day is, if you believe in what you're doing, you push. And if you have to ask for something 12 times because you know it's in the best interest of that person and they want it, they just don't know how to say yes, don't give up. We just did it wrong. You and I were a couple of buffoons in there, like two monkeys fighting over a football in there. But it was a fun time, and I'll never forget that story of that how he got upset and you were like, dude, I don't know if we did that right. I'm like, I don't know. We probably broke a record for asking for the check 12 times.
Well, I know you had said it. You were my training manager. I was just doing what my training manager told me to
put the blame on me.
No, I think even as you tell that story, to me, I'm very passionate about this industry, and I've seen a lot of financial failure because of what you just described, where husbands and wives aren't on the same page because they don't talk about these things. And I don't know whether or not that was true in this case or not, but when you are getting I'll call them buying signals from one half of your customer saying, I need this, I want this, or we need this and we want this, again, to your point, sometimes you got to push, but probably not as hard as we did that day.
Well, we pushed because we were inexperienced and didn't have a lot of talent in the industry yet. So all we could do is just blunt force trauma. We had to do it in a very, very brutal way. We could have been a little more suave. Probably 30 years later, we're going to handle that situation much differently. But you live and learn.
For sure. Absolutely.
All right, brother, what's next for you?
I don't know. You bring me back on the podcast?
Yeah, I'd love to have you back on. There's 30 years of wisdom in that head we got to pull out.
Yeah, it's a good question. So we're at these crossroads. So, I have 3 wonderful children, technically 4 because my oldest just got married, and we're really excited for them. They live in New York City. And my new son-in-law is so talented. He's a trained opera singer, and he's going to give it a go in New York City. And when I tell you, Brian, you listen to him sing, man, it makes the hair on your arm stand up. And I've been encouraging them because if not now, when? And I want to be his biggest cheerleader and proponent because I think he has the talent. So my oldest 2, we'll call them, are out of the house. My 2 youngest 2 just moved to Tampa, Florida, and we're empty nesters for the first time. My wife and I are, getting to know each other again. And what I mean by that is we've got a very strong relationship, but sometimes when you have people in the house, they act as a buffer, and you don't have to always have the deep conversations, although we've always really done a good job with that. So, we're trying to figure out what that next step is. My 2 youngest just moved out in February. So we've been traveling a lot, almost to a fault. We were exhausted after the first part of the year, some business, some fun. And then obviously, my oldest daughter just graduated with a degree in dance movement therapy. So we went out to New York City to celebrate with her. So I think it's one of these times, Brian, where, I'm going to invoke that patience word again. Yeah. It's also new that I think we have to understand where we're supposed to be right now and just continue to work through it together. So, where that leads or what's next, I don't really know right now, but I'm trying to, listen to my own words, which is I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be right now. Be in the moment, be patient, enjoy this time uninterrupted with my beautiful wife and see where it goes.
I love it, brother. Give my best to Margaret too. Will you please tell her I said hello?
I will. Absolutely.
Okay. Final question. Is there any question, Shannon, that I did not ask that you wish I would have, or is there any final message you can leave with the Bamboo Pack members out there?
Not a question, but, I talked about being a quote guy. Brian, I said it a little bit, when I thanked your mother. I have used you as an example throughout my career where people have said, hey, you're really successful in this area. What was your secret to success? And a lot of times I said, well, I'm a little bit of Brian Bosley on this, and I'm a little bit of Fadi Barati on this, and I'm a little bit of my brother Sean on this. And it's that summation of all these people that impact you that make you who you are. And I attended a retirement party for a family friend many years ago. And I was asked by his son to say a few words. Now, this is my mom and dad best friends. So they were around the household my entire life. And he wasn't a very outgoing man as far as his words, but I think he lived a Christian perspective every day of his life and set an example for me that I still carry on today. So at his retirement, I read this thing. This was on my the bulletin board of my high school in the locker room. And some of your listeners may have heard this before, and I may butcher it a little bit, but it says, there's a wide-eyed little fellow who believes you are always right, and his ears are always open, and he's watching day and night. For you're setting an example in everything you do for the little boy who's dreaming to grow up to be like you. And I put that on a plaque, and I gave that to him as his retirement gift. And I had never said those words or anything close to that to this man my entire life. And it was funny. I had another commitment. So when I talked to his son, I said, hey, I can talk, but I have to go first. And then I've got to leave, unfortunately. And I didn't get to stay there. But what I heard was afterwards, like, nobody wanted to speak after me, and nobody wanted, and again, he had a great retirement party. But Brian, you were that type of person to me, and you don't understand. You were trying to be a new leader, and you were, probably 1 year ahead of me, as we've described here. But the impact you had on me in the moment, because I didn't know what to do at that point in my career. I didn't know how to say things. I didn't know how to close 12 times. And maybe your view of me was very different, but you gave me a comfort to continue being who I wanted to be because you believed in me. And I really think in life, if we can remember that quote, and this was stapled to the bulletin board back when we had bulletin boards in my high school locker room. And that's how much of an impact it made on me when I was probably 14 years old, that I've used it throughout my life, because what I took away from it is every single day of our lives, somebody's watching. And most of the time, we don't know that they're watching, or like me to you, the impact that you were having because they were watching is way greater than you give yourself credit for. See, the problem is we don't get to measure that. That's measured by the people that are watching us. And when I gave my father's eulogy, I talked about, my dad did all these great things for me. But the thing that I remember the most was my dad on the weekends had to go up to the place that he worked. He was in quality control at the time. And he had to make sure that the plant was locked down, all the machinery was shut off, basically just doing quality control.
Right.
And he used to take me there on the weekends. And it was my happiest time of the weekend because my dad took time to take me. And he used to put me on the back of a high-low and drive me around. A high-low to me was like this crazy. I knew what a car was, but I didn't know what a high-low was. And then he used to have these vending machines that you would get coffee and hot chocolate out of. And he would buy me a hot chocolate. And we did this every weekend for years. And that is one of my most treasured moments. My dad probably thought, I'm just going to check on the shop and I'm bringing my boys with me. But I was that wide-eyed little fellow that was watching my dad going, oh, this is where he works. Oh, man, he must be important because look at those 72 keys on his key ring. It's all these things from the perspective of the observer that really, really makes an impact. So if I can leave, I think you called them your pack, with anything, it's like, people are watching you every single day, and you don't get to define exactly how they're going to take that away, but just make sure that you're trying to leave that legacy that I talked about earlier. And Brian, I want to thank you not only for inviting me on today, but for being one of those people that truly left a legacy in me way back 30 years ago. So thank you.
It was an honor, brother. I told you before we started today, there's been 3 people from my American Express days that I had the privilege of at least being a part of their journey. And in the order of time, of sequential order, the first one was you were the first one. Then John Evangelista in Ann Arbor was number 2. Then Rob Mulcahy in Livonia were 3 people that I had a chance to work with that I had made a slight impact on their lives, but always stayed in my heart and my head over the years. So thank you for being that man.
Absolutely. Thank you, brother.
All right. Can you stand for a few minutes after we shut off?
Absolutely. Would love to.
Shannon, man, I appreciate you. We have been friends for 30 years, and we're going to have another 30 ahead of us. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Everyone, please, this was a podcast episode that obviously had an impact on me emotionally. And I think for a lot of you, there's so much wisdom that Shannon shared from his experiences in the life, financial industry, his life with his parents. Please listen to this one twice. I don't listen to my show very often. Very seldom do I actually listen to it because I already feel I listened to it but this is when I'm going to replay this weekend when I get time. I'm going to ask you to do yourself and do your friends and family a favor. Share this with 3 people. Let them get the wisdom and experience that Shannon offered here today. And please, for my benefit, to help the algorithm, please hit that like button, rate and review us, and just know that I appreciate each and every one of you listeners. I'll talk to you all in 1 week. In the meantime, please get out there and strive to give and be your best. Show love and respect to others and back at yourself. And please live with intention. I appreciate each and every single one of you. Bye-bye.